Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. So I'm just going to get into it and sharing my screen. Okay. Um, oh, I should go from this. Sorry. Okay. Do you guys see the just okay?
Yes, perfect.
I'm just going to do a classic from beginning where I started to what I'm doing now. Um, so I went to art high school in Yazd, Iran. This is my high school. I went to a very beautiful building. I it was like I am putting that part always in my presentation because I think that had a very crucial role in my whole like practice. I think I was very lucky at the time, like the teacher that I had back then and the group of students that we kind of shaped a collective together. That really informed my practice. I can say till now, I think those days and those years were so forming for what I'm doing now. So I studied painting in high school. Why is that? Okay. So I studied painting but I was more interested rather than like, classic like oil painting. I was like more into like experimenting with material, like things that are like this is like wood glue, paper, ink, all glued onto wood frame and like carving into. So it was like more experimenting, which is still something that what makes me most excited, like the unknown part of material. Um, and so these are some of the works from back then. And through like those classes or those painting classes, I got to know about composition and like some color, but I never really gravitated toward color. So I'm still on the monotone color palette. And then performance was the thing that I'm like really still the core of my practice, and that was the thing that um our teacher like like there in the books, the school textbook, we didn't have that, but that teacher specifically would bring magazines from that is up to date and like show us like what performance art is and the fact that your body could become a sculpture and can activate a space and it could happen in a place, and it's what is remain is like in the eye of the viewer, and you can just like walk away and as if nothing has happened. And I really like that power that it had. It was inherent in the performing. This was one of the first performances that I did with the collective that we shaped. It was seven of us. We called ourselves دختران جمعه because we would gather on Friday, the weekends, and we worked together. And so we asked the Yazd Art University if we can do. None of us were the students of that university back then. We just graduated from high school, and we asked if we could do something on their campus, and they allowed us because they really didn't know what we were about to do. We were supposed to have this for like a duration of a week, but after like the first day, they were like, "Sorry, don't come back like to do this." And this, so each of us took a part in one space in that old Yaz buildings, and I had an idea for this pose in the center, and this was an art school, so painting was a thing there, and I decided to make painting under the water, kind of doing action of like a futile action of trying to make a painting under the water while it's like it's doesn't work. And it was like kind of poking at like what does it really even mean to create an image. And so this was one of the first performances that I did. And I remember like in the middle of it, I was like, okay, how am I going to end this thing? I was like, and then I decided it would be a good idea. I knew my teacher is in the crowd, so I called his name out. I think here you guys can hear the sound probably. Can you hear the sound? of the video? No. Okay. So at some point I'm calling out my teacher's name and I'm saying like, "Oh, is this painting good?" It's like, usually the action that you do in painting class. And it was kind of mocking action. Um, and then so it was like a series of performances and I became a part of my friend's performance and so on. And then so fast forward, I I came to Los Angeles, not through, I mean, that doesn't matter, but I came to Los Angeles and I went to art university at CalArts for BFA. And this was, I mean, coming here as it's, I think, a shared experience for all of us, like when we leave Iran and we already have friends and a community and you're thrown into this like unknown place that you don't have any friends. The language was still like a barrier for me. And I was like, also the context was the main thing for my work. And I felt kind of lost of like, what does it even mean to make work in this new context that I don't know who my audience is? Or yeah, what does it mean really to make work? So I kind of, my work became about that of being not being able to communicate. And so this was the one of the first works that I did, which was I'm in this box and with some needles and threads, and I poke um, the needle out, and with the help of the audience, they poke it back in. So we are creating kind of this dialogue. Like I was thinking about an alternative way of communicating, and it was like with thread and needle. And by the end of this performance, I undo basically all the conversations that had happened and became like a blank surface for the next conversation. And then I think this is I think because our time is limited, I'm going to skip this one. This is my thesis show. And so I graduated 2017 from CalArts, and there was like a 2-year gap in between. And then I attended UCLA for my MFA in ceramics specifically. For CalArts, there was no specific like area to apply to, but for UCLA there was, and Farshid was in sculpture. And I attended for the ceramic program. And then so this is 2019. It's right before the pandemic. It's in December, and there is a thing like called Open Studio that happens twice a year at UCLA, and it's kind of a big deal. Like everyone prepared their studios, and like a kind of a big crowd would come through, and some opportunities come through those. So it's like there is a pressure on like what you're presenting. And it happened to be exactly at the time that there was an upheaval in Iran over the gas price spike. And it was I think it was like the first time that really they shut down the internet, and we saw what happened afterward. But my parents were in Iran at the time, and it was like all we could hear was basically through the news, like BBC News or VOA or whatever we could get a hold of. And it was so weird for me, or meaningless, to create work in this kind of situations. Like, what does it even mean to create work? So I decided to clean out my studio, empty everything, and just have my workbench attached to the wall, and create this situation as if like I'm creating something, but everything is as if it would be like the laptop that is attached. It has a live feedback, like live play of like BBC News. And I'm trying to create a sculpture again, like a futile action of trying to make something and working against the gravity. And I felt that's like the most true feeling that I like. It's like the most genuine action that I can do in that time. And so obviously I would build to some extent, and then because of the gravity. And clay was a very I think proper material for it because clay is so relying on the gravity. Um, and so yeah, that was that work. And what's the next is my thesis show at UCLA. It was called Past Seeps Through the Present. And also, please let me know. I'm not tracking the time. So let me know when it's like few minutes before it's 15 minutes. I know that's our time frame. Um, so this is like a um, working about like a past stories, generations, the things that hasn't been handed down or told, that is shapeless, but it somehow get passed down. And so the above is a cast of my grandmother's body, out of clay. Aspire to low fire. It's pretty porous and it has small pores that the water slowly seeps out of it. And at the bottom is a cast of my mom's body that is out of unfired clay. So over time, the water from the above body seeps out and drips into the my mom's body that is on the couch, and it would deteriorate. And that's kind of a theme that has still shows up in different works in my work. That's slow change, like that decay that is like inherent in many materials. It's like almost everything, nothing lasts forever. And yeah, and then there was this work that it had a performative element to it. I built this wall that on one side there was this rocking couch, that all these threads, about like 800 threads, were attached to the fingers that you saw in the other image. Going to fast forward so you can. So there is the slab. This is all ceramic clay on the right side. And there this the image transfer is my great grandparents, and the fingers that are attached on it is a cast of my grandmother's finger. And each of these fingers connected to like two threads that goes through the wall and get attached to the rocking chair. So as I'm rocking the chair, the fingers kind of lift and reveal the image and tap back and create the sound, and then the action of slow. So the tapping, because everything is clay, over time changes the image and wear down the image. Um, and 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 then in the same show, I use this technique of transferring image with clay slip, like creating the image and then inserting this glaze bits into the clay and firing the whole thing in a vertical situation at a higher temperature that actually the glaze can go to. And so the glazes would kind of ooze out of the clay slab, and it create this like dripping, like sweat tear situation on the image. And I thought this like is kind of like a frozen moment of what's happening in the other body. And again, it's like about this memories, the past that is like slowly like it's kind of coming alive or coming like this liquid form that is shapeless. Um, these are some more of from the same series. Um, and so this work was again another work that I brought in the element of water, and the water is circulating through this sculpture, and over time, and everything is on a metal platform, so the water creates rust, and the rust is circulating on the body. And many people like really thought that the water is causing this sculpture to decay, but everything is fired, so it's like pretty, it would last unless it breaks. But because of the rust and the patina that it was creating over time, it created that illusion that this is going to like fall apart at some point. Um, and yeah, I just wanted to include some process photos, like from the idea. This is like what I basically proposed to them, to the process of making, and like so many failure happens in the kiln, in the firing. It was like one of the first work that I went at that scale, and it makes a huge difference. And then there's a deadline, everything becomes like really stressful when the material is not working with you. But sometimes like it happens for the best. I remember like the cracks that were happening was really bothering me, but I had to rush it because there was a deadline and I could not wait till the clay is fully dry. But then at the end, I think the crack really helped for like what was the final sculpture. And then this was a performance that I did as a part of the same exhibition. It's called Between Two Windows, and the idea was to create an interior space of a home inside a wall and connecting the two sides of the wall with these two windows, that one kind of represent my grandmother's home in Iran and one our home in here in America. And this is like, and then, so this is the interior of the space. And there would be this like two fans that will circulate these images in the space. And over time, this paper, these images would tear apart and the image become less and less like readable or like obvious. So it was like also like another way of showing like how memories fade away or change. And yeah, and then residency. That's another thing that as an artist is like Farshid is right now in a residency that he's going to talk about it. But this was the first residency that I did, and it was in China, out of any place. I got like through the previous show, someone saw my work, and so this opportunity came from that, and so it was a deadline for a show, and they were like, okay, it's better or more affordable if you come to China and actually produce the work there instead of creating it in America and then shipping it there. So I created the sculpture that the idea was to cast the whole thing. And this is like basically, I mean, things went not exactly the way I wanted, as always. And then the idea was to cast actually that sculpture and then I mean make a mold and cast it in metal. But then that didn't work. So actually I showed the actual mold as a water reservoir and also like as a negative space of what that sculpture was. And the this thing above this image is holding water again, and then the water is slowly seeping out and get collected in this kind of water reservoir that is a negative cast of a sculpture. And then in the other space, I had this durational performance that I'm counterbalancing this image that is transferred onto a clay slab. It weighs about like 100 pounds. And like I'm holding that weight for a duration of 1 hour with my body, the weight of my body. And the image is an image of my grandmother and my mom as a child. And when I was not performing, this is how it existed in the space. I think I'm going to fast forward. Well, this was another sculpture, again, decay and slow erosion and movement also is the thing that it excites me the most. And so in these hands that are cast off my mom's hand over time, they tap on each other and wear away. And again, it's like this, the title was a tap award. Um, and also, these wall works, these imageries are the most direct or immediate way for me to capture an image. And actually, this is what I'm doing right now in my studio as I'm like in between two open timelines. And I enjoy creating this kind of surreal, kind of interior space, exterior, but bodies again are like pretty prominent. And I think these are like also very connected to part to my performative like side of my practice. Um, and they're very psychological, as you can see. Sometimes they come out of dreams that I have. And yeah, and in general, drawing has a big role. Like sometimes I draw an idea and it happened to be exactly what I draw, but sometimes the material doesn't do what exactly I wanted, so it becomes something else. This was a performative, like a work that I did in 2024. Basically, my dress is getting pulled by this motor from side to side while I'm trying to keep this flame going, basically. Um, and then this whole show was in a home space in Mexico City. And in each room there was one thing happening. So that happened in the other room, and in another room there were these candles that would like kind of topple from one side to the other, and almost the flames going off, but it doesn't. And I think that moment of like precarity, that almost something is falling apart, almost turning off, but it doesn't. Um, And in the other room, there was this also another moving sculpture that there's pebbles. And I mean, this is like a second iteration of that work. It's in another space, but first it was a part of that show. And so during the month of the show, these pebbles and the 2 feet are circulating in this pattern and making a mark on the floor, basically. Um, and then the most recent show that I had in LA was I'm just going to show the video. Um, it was I had the opportunity to have two shows at the same time in the same city, and I was like, okay, how can I like what does that mean to even have two shows at the same time? And I always I think about like a cause and effect, like something happens in one space and how does that translate in somewhere else, like without us being aware of. And I was like, okay, I make the space. In one space, there are this sculpture on a flexible floor that as people walk around this ceramic sculpture kind of hit each other and create the sound. And then the sound get picked by this contact mic. Basically, the vibration gets picked and the vibration gets transferred into the other space at Joan Gallery. Um, and in a second, that would be what happens. And so people who come to this show has no idea their movement around the sculpt. They can see their movement in this space, how it's destroying this. I mean, I say destroying, but like kind of wears away and changing the work. But also there is this other part of it that it's doing things to this other sculptures that is not visible to them unless they go to the other space and see what's happening while someone else is walking in the other space. And this is basically, there was different situation. Like this one was a sifting situation. There was this hovering body that this clay bits are sifting and then falling onto this bed frame kind of, and then the bed frame is sifting, and then there are these finer clay particles underneath the bed. And then there would be this other uh, situation that this shelves would be vibrating, and over the course of the exhibition they would kind of like fall apart and fall off of the shelf. And then also there would be this situation that there would be two chairs across each other, and the viewer is invited to sit on one and witness what's happening. So they would feel that vibration in their body, and then also they see what the vibration is doing to the material across them. Um, and then there is like experiments with material that's like, as I say from beginning, is something that I'm excited. And this was like the first time working with bronze and pouring the hot bronze onto ceramic. And because of the thermal shock, it would crack the ceramic, but then physically it would hold it together. These are just like some installation shots from the exhibition. Um, and this is my studio. This is the picture is from when it was very messy. It was like I was in the middle of the show. Now it's like way more organized. So yeah, that's it. Going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Roxana. Thanks for taking us through your art and explaining it, especially for people like me that don't have a background. Having that explanation just made your work so much more beautiful. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So next we will present Farshid's work. So Farshid Bozmandagan was born and raised in Iran. He's an Iranian American artist currently living and working in Los Angeles. He received his MFA in sculpture from UCLA and his BA in visual arts from UC San Diego. His work explores the intersection of memory, violence, and the material world to examine the complexities of displacement and geopolitics. By delving into personal, political, and historical narratives, he reflects on the idea of a body without a home in the landscape of exile. So help me welcome Farshid.
Thank you so much for the introduction and having me. And Roxana Jan, I really enjoy your presentation. And Helio Jan, thanks for invitation. So I'm trying to get connected to or share my screen. Perfect. Like Roxana, I like to show some of my early work, and I want to write down the time. Um, I didn't train as a traditional artist. I started my art practice um, when I started my undergrad at UC San Diego. I started with media art, specifically focusing on experimental media, filmmaking, and photography, but I was really interested about site-specific installation, and I got draw a lot to responding to my condition as someone processing a lot of experiences related to memory displacement, and I got really interested to institutional critique when I was at UC San Diego. We started this project back in 2015. Um, I had the opportunity to have a solo show inside the gallery in the basement, and on the rooftop of the gallery, I found this tree stump, and I was really interested to working with this specific object. I remove all the dirt, and I remove part of the root, and I exhibit it inside the gallery, and that was the only object inside the gallery. So audiences were invited to see both inside the gallery and also on the roof and engaging with the both presentation. I was around the time I was getting my US citizenship, and I was kind of excited, and at the same time I was just processing what that means to have dual citizenship. And that was the moment I was processing in this specific piece. For my undergrad thesis, some of the UC system is school offering the honors program when you're undergrad. I was part of that program, and as part of that, you have to present a thesis for your undergraduate degree. And I was really interested to thinking about the idea of deny access, both based off my personal memory in Iran and also the experiences I had in the US and also in the art world. I made a solid concrete wall overnight to the entry of the gallery. Audiences were invited to join, open the door during the opening reception, and experiencing the solid wall. And I had an art piece inside the gallery, but no one had access to see and experience the art. After the closing, I destroyed the wall, and I kept part of these materials. I was really interested about that gesture and the history of those materials related to this gesture, and I made new pieces. I'm gonna jump to my kind of more recent work, specifically related to UCLA, which I had around 4 years gap after UCSD, and I was working in the field of art um, related with academia. Was in charge of the gallery at UC San Diego, and towards the end, I will talk a little bit more about it, just in case someone is interested more about exhibition and public programming. And after 4 years, I attend MFA program at UCLA for a sculpture, which I had the privilege to meet Roxana. And my practice shifted when I was at I started my program. It was like I started before that, like I want to say like around 2019, 2020, my concern shifted in my practice and urgency about some of the challenges I was facing myself, and I was seeing Iranian and both Middle Eastern community facing, specifically in academia, and that was kind of helping me to navigate a new body of work. And I was really interested about this intersection of both personal and political and how those political and historical events affected my personal life. And specifically, I was really interested to looking and questioning how I end up coming to the country which created my exile. And through that question, I was investigating to 1953 coup d'etat organized or co-organized by CIA and the process of removing Mossadegh in response to many things, including nationalizing the Iranian oil. And through that process, I was really interested about materiality and working with the specific materials to engage with the narrative, engage with the violence and the personal aspect of it. On the left side, you will see Mossadegh, and on the right side is my face and my paperwork when I was getting to the US. Let's see. So this is my studio at UCLA, which I was really interested about a long-term aspect of my practice, working with a lot of documents to exercise that presentation. And I was just including to give you some insight about the processing. But I was really interested to really challenging myself with the shape and the presentation. And I was really interested to flattening those old drum and turning it into a form of canvas for my foundation. Um, there are different type of presentation. I work with the same materials. Um, and sometimes in my practice, I'm really interested about working with different type of mediums, and I had access through UCLA, specifically working with clay. And inside the vessel, I have CIA document. Um, Here I have four flatted oil drums, which I was really interested to look into most recent history of Iran by investigating through my family archive, and I was really interested. And I find these two images of my family in the Garden of Hafez in Shiraz, where I'm from. And the image on the top is my family in front of the Hafiz temple. And one thing I was very interesting, they're not wearing hijab. And the second image, my family wearing hijab, and my mom and my grandma. I was born then, and my brother wearing the army jacket, which was during the Iran-Iraq War. I was really interested to look into those kind of like archive materials and using them as a form of storytelling for that specific project. This is one of the most recent project I did. I'm also really interested sometimes to working with that type of um, dynamic between function object and the contrast between an object, uh, the cold read of the object, and when you're investigating on the materiality and the narrative, how the whole narrative is shifting. Um, and this piece is part of my thesis here at UCLA, which again, I used the 55-gallon oil drums. I flat them and made them to this specific shape of arch or a dorm form. And I installed it in front of the carpet, which I was gifted recently from Iran. It was a carpet from our living room. It's a piece of home for me, and I was really interested about that presentation and this idea of deny access or this dream of returning home. There's more details on that work. And as part of my thesis, I was also interested to working with some footage, which was sent to me by my dad. My childhood house was destroyed, and I asked my dad before the house being destroyed to record the house for me. And he was using his phone, and I noticed he walked to the garden. And as he was recording, he was talking about each plants and each trees in that garden in relationship to who planted them and when. And I was really interested about this kind of poetic, organic dialogue he was um, doing it for me, and I included in my thesis show in that presentation. Um, and most recently, I had an exhibition in Los Angeles near to LAX, the airport. It was in the rooftop. And as part of the exhibition, I was really thinking about how I can engage with the audiences who are in the airplanes, flying and seeing this presentation. And also the presentation was in front of the billboard. Um, if you are from LA or in LA area, in the past few years, you have probably seen so many US military advertising around the city. And I was really sensitive about those military billboards. And as a Iranian Middle Eastern men being targeted, receiving emails and texts. I was really interested to also specifically responding to those billboard, and I see them as sign of violence in urban landscape, but how we adapt into them. And I had a specific response to that billboard. The billboard was on the left, and that was my flag as part of that presentation, responding to a specific part of the billboard. Um, Most recently, starting working with the new materials to make more connection to my personal experiences and the collective experience of displaced bodies. And I'm really interested to working with gold emergency blankets. And I use gold emergency blanket, use tar, and I melting them together to create this form of abstract landscape. Um, and sometimes create a form with that materials. That um, installation was inspired by a poem, Arghavan. Um, I don't know why I'm forgetting the name of the. Uh, anyway, so that was a response to that poem, and I create that specific presentation. And as part of that new body of work, working with emergency blanket, I sometimes paint or use paint on top of those materials. I'm really interested about overlapping art history with geopolitics. At the time, CIA organized the coup d'etat in Iran. At the same time, CIA supported abstraction in the US. I was just really thinking about this overlapping of uh, art history, geopolitics, and when they supported the abstraction, they really wanted to show Iran, American democracy and value, but at the same time, they were removing Iranian democracy in 1953. I was really interested about that overlapping. And That was a recent piece I worked on, and and as we all experiencing such a unique part of Iranian history, such a dark moment for all of us. I was really sensitive and trying to witness about the past few months, the situation so many of Iranian, both in diaspora and in Iran, facing, and I was really interested to find a way to engage with that ongoing issue. That was one of the response I had. There was a piece on the rooftop, and I am currently working on an installation, and I'm showing somehow a behind the scene. If you're in San Diego, it's going to be open on June 6th. I was really thinking about so many aspects. It started as part of an artist residency last year, and I was really investigating on this idea of futurism in my practice and dreaming on returning home through looking to nostalgia and a painting from my childhood memory. But then through the process of this exhibition, a lot of things happened, and I was really interested to shifting and adapting that installation to be more related to these ongoing challenges we are facing. And I create this form of front and back presentation, and I have created this new form of Hejle Marg, which we honor in a lot of loss. And I was really thinking about this collective pain and loss we are facing right now. And yeah, so that's about my work. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bashit, for sharing that with us. There was a lot of political imagery that's very interesting to see, and your family also. So thank you.
Of course.
So next we will present Helio Puyanfer. She's an interdisciplinary artist whose work investigates the permanently transient state of the refugee body and its negotiation and reconciliation with place. Through sculpture and photography, she manipulates architectural objects, recontextualizing architecture as a form of poetic nomadism while exploring the relationship between memory and movement. Puyanvar received her BA in Arts Practice from UC Berkeley in 2019 and her MFA in Studio Art from UC Davis in 2022.
Hi everyone. Thank you for that, Kim Jun. I'm very excited to be here with Roxana and Farshi to talk a bit about my work. Are you able to see? Wait, I think I did the wrong way. One second. There you go. Are you able to see the screen?
That's
Okay,
perfect.
okay. Yeah, so yeah, like Kim Jun mentioned, my work is about investigating the permanently transient state of the refugee body. And what that means is what happens to the body when the you're you don't have the permission to be anywhere in a sense. The reason I'm interested in this idea or topic is because that's how I came to this country myself as a refugee about 10 years ago. And I've noticed that through that experience, my understanding of place and in relation to that time has completely changed. And so I investigate all of those ideas through architecture specifically because this is a family language in a sense, like a family material language. A lot of people in my family, like close relatives, do construction work or project management or anything relating to architecture. So I use architecture as a metaphor for this idea of place. And I want to read like just one sentence from a scholar that I refer to a lot. So he says, a house constitutes a body of images that give mankind proofs or illusions of stability. And the reason I'm interested in this quote is because it's my work is all about this idea of stability. What does stability mean in this context, in a sense? So I use a lot of Iranian motifs in my work. For example, in this work, you might notice the pattern on these bricks that I've made out of cement. That it's common in like grandparents' homes, like you see them. It's like kind of the security glass that sometimes like older Iranian homes have. And these are all markers of memory for me. That's why I'm interested in using these motifs that are repeated around us in architecture as a way of referring to that. And so there are images of my family embedded within these bricks, and they're kind of reacting to the resin that's was poured on. And what I do in these pieces, a lot of times I kind of remove the place or the space that's in the background in a sense. And you will see later that I like replace it with mirrors sometimes. And that's my way of talking about this peculiar experience that we have when within this context again. And I'm showing earlier work again because I feel like it kind of helps kind of contextualize my current practice. And this is where kind of my current practice started, basically in grad school when I was at UC Davis. I started having this question of you can bring so many things with you across the border. You can bring family photos, you can bring your clothes or the books that you feel connected to. But the physical parameter of the home itself, like the architecture of the home, the walls of the home, you cannot bring. And so I started asking, like, what if you could? How would that look like? So I made these transportable or mobile pieces of wall that, for example, in this piece is a backpack that can cross with you anywhere and like it would travel with the body. Or in this piece, it's like a suitcase. And I'm kind of thinking about, this is each side of the suitcase. It's like one room in one side and the other room on the other side, and they are kind of connected and they become a suitcase. And you can take the like this piece of wall with you in a sense. And the reason I'm interested in, and for example, this is another piece that has wheels, and it's like a piece of wall that most of it is made from scratch. So these are kind of imaginations or kind of a representative of that wish to bring your home with you kind of across the border. And the reason I'm like really interested in the jagged edges of in my work is because I think a lot about like this idea of passage, both in a sense of like passing through space, but also like a passage of a story. So imagining like you rip a piece of paper out and like you specifically want that portion of whatever story you're referring to, kind of mimicking that, like those edges in a sense, or even like just the attempt of, you know what, I'm just going to bring this piece of wall with me even though it's absurd and gigantic and heavy. So I started making all these, like the pieces became bigger and bigger, and I started making these kind of setups. My work, I would say it's a bit theatrical in a sense, or has some performative element to it. And so there are these walls that have wheels, and they can just kind of travel in a sense in wherever they are, and they're out of context. And specifically, I think this is where, towards the end of my program at UC Davis, I was thinking a lot about the metaphoric aspects of each of these ideas that I'm thinking about, or anything that in architecture that I'm referring to. For example, what does a door do? The door allows passage from one side to the other, and that's kind of a response to the idea of borders again, where borders hinder, movement, and doors allow that to happen. We can pass through private to public. We can pass through inside to outside. All of these elements are kind of embedded within just the iconography of like a door. And so I made this door that seems like it was cut out of like a house or a place, and has wheels now. And it's just, I took it out one day at Davis, and we were just wandering around in the city and like kind of crossing the street, and it was visiting other, like in the previous one, it was visiting other doors and other homes, and it went to some landscape somewhere. And the humor and absurdity embedded in the work is also really important for me, because these pieces are like, again, if we think of them as characters, they have very complex personality. So they are disconnected and disjointed from their origin. Um, but within that, they have the freedom to roam around. And within that freedom is kind of absurd because they're imposing themselves on it like an out of context space in a sense. And this is my thesis work at UC Davis. And I was, again, really thinking about what doors mean. And I was very inspired by Sia Armajani, who's an incredible Iranian artist and architect who passed away, like, I think 2 years ago. And his practice was to build bridges. And someone asked him, why do you build bridges? But the bridges he built does not connect a point to another. So there's a famous work of his that is under the Brooklyn Bridge, and he has connected. He just built a bridge in a landscape, and the Brooklyn Bridge is in the background, and the bridge goes over a tree that he planted in the middle, and that's it. Like, it does not connect. It doesn't take you anywhere, so you can just cross the landscape instead of crossing the bridge. And someone asked him, like, why do you build bridges? And he was like, that's my response to the idea of borders, because I want to facilitate movement in a sense. And so I was very inspired by that idea. And I was thinking about, again, about this threshold, or like this opening that body is allowed to pass through. And also at the same time, kind of thinking about memory. And so what I did was for some reason, we did not bring like many photos with us from my childhood when we left. And so what I did was, because I don't have access to archive, I would look up objects I remember from my childhood, for example, my bed, or a tea tray, or like a flower that I really liked. And I would find them on Google and find the closest looking that I could think, like, to my memory in a sense, and would collage back these spaces together, and printed them really large, and kind of like this, the whole space is flat against the wall in a sense. And so, like, even you might notice the telephone, these are all like things that from a certain generation in Iran you have connections to. And so I created all these like layers of memory in a sense that the body is allowed to kind of move through. And this was my way of kind of talking about that. And I'm interested in also showing what's inside the wall, what's like the crudeness of inside the architecture. If we think of architecture as a living, entity, then what would the contrast between the inside and the outside, or what's hidden and what's in view, is interesting to me as well. And so again, like, these are some of these images are specific to our family archive, and most of it is kind of collage backed and found online, kind of put together. And more recent years, my work is becoming more about the idea of disorientation, to feel disoriented. Because again, when we talk about being a refugee, in a sense, you're not allowed to go back to where you came from. You're also not allowed to be anywhere yet. So what happens to the body in that state? And so this image, this like pattern I saw some like on a ceiling somewhere, and this whole idea of like kind of disrupting dimensions of architecture came into my mind. So like, in a sense, I wanted to make that pattern into a pillow and like rest my head on the ceiling, in a sense. It's like kind of just thinking poetically about all of those ideas. And I like the cyclical kind of motion of the pattern that like kind of talks about this movement of the body, where like whenever you leave somewhere, you're always arriving at something. It's not that it doesn't end in that moment, in a sense. And so I also do reference a lot of Iranian iconography in my work. So this is like a sarv tree, or a cypress tree, which is a symbol of freedom in Iranian literature for a long time. And it was also my grandpa's favorite tree. And what I did here is I removed the background, and so I screen printed this tree on pieces of mirror. And it's an attempt to kind of project this image onto wherever it is, because the mirror only reflects in that moment, and in that, wherever it's placed, it only reflects what's in front of it in that moment. And so this is my way of kind of trying to project this image or idea wherever this work goes. This image is going to impose itself again in that space. And somehow it became like kind of a gravesite as well. And my grandpa passed away when I was here. I couldn't see him, so it felt like a memorial kind of for him. And so I continued this idea into this body of work, which is again images that I found online and collage back to the room. are kind of, I removed the walls from the work, and these are just suspended in that timeless placeness context of the mirror, and they're imposing themselves again. Whoever is standing in front of it, they might be out of context in this scenario or in this room, or they might feel just as home. Like, for example, if I stand in front of it, I would recognize that space in a sense. And this is a project that my parents I did with my parents. They bought a house, abandoned house in LA, and my dad does renovations, so he started renovating it. And while they were doing that, it was really interesting to me, this idea of we're not refugee family anymore, but we used to be. And so this idea of owning a plot of land on this country, like when does belonging happen? Does that happen when you actually own space, or does it happen? It's more psychological. And so I kind of asked them to kind of take the shape and the mold of the house, and it was very humorous. Obviously, they didn't really want to do it. So it was a lot of like going back and forth and being like, just trust me, just do it. And so it all culminated in an exhibition that I showed in LA, and Roxana actually was able to come and see the work. And I was interested in this project specifically because my parents both have very different responses to this experience that we all had. My mom is the kind of person who really wants to reconnect back to Iran and like to her family. And also I'm sure my dad has the same feelings, but what he presents is more like, no, I'm here, I'm gonna think about making this place a home for us in a sense. And so this both dichotomy of wanting to reconnect and wanting to construct anew is like was really interesting for me to think about and like project in this work. And here are some more examples of the other kind of body of work that I mentioned earlier. This is a chair that my grandma used to sit at a lot at her place. Again, I don't have a photo of this. This is what I found online on. So kind of creating access, even though I don't have access to those images or archive at currently. So and this is another piece that is like pieces of drywall that are sewn together with wire. And the wire kind of mimics this like barbed wire, but it also can mimic like a stitch that is connecting these pieces together. And so there's this idea, again, destruction and mending and like putting things together. And this was like a kind of act like a a blanket. It's called safety blanket. And so these pieces or these patches of memory coming together. And this is my latest exhibition that I had at Recology Art Residency. And this latest body of work is what is really kind of amplifying this idea of disorientation again. So I'm very inspired by things that I see around architecture wherever I go. So at my place right now, I have like, it's right behind me, it's like a built-in cabinet in the wall. And so it made me think of, oh, the wall like it has this capacity to hold memory or hold archive or information within it. So thinking about the inside, like what's possible to keep inside the architecture as well. Or so this residency, the context of it is like people would throw things out, and then you were able to bring them back into your studio and alter them. And so I was really thinking about, all these objects being living beings. And so I saw this really tall door that kind of seemed really funny looking. And when it was leaning against the wall, I just felt like I wanted to have a head and kind of almost make it feel like it's waiting for something. And wax also became a marker of time for me in my work. For example, like when you melt the wax, it's showing how much time has passed. So time and places are kind of going hand in hand in these recent body of work. And this was like a marble carving that was in someone's garden that they threw out, and I cast it out of wax and uh, kind of did the melting part, so to show that there's like the time passing in the work as well. And here are some more examples of the kind of similar to what I was making. And in these last two pieces, it's kind of, again, the same idea of disorientation or disrupting where the dimensions of the house. So this part is usually where it's like connecting the ceiling to the wall in like a corner, and now it's on the floor and next to like a piece of like another piece of wall that's supposed to be flat, and they're kind of disrupted in a sense and disoriented in a sense. And this last project is kind of maybe kind of embodying all those ideas uh, within it. This is like inside of a cabinet next to the flooring, next to a door, next to a window, next to where like an air went. And and I'm really excited to kind of work more with this idea of disorientation and like not quite being able to locate yourself within any space you are. And again, all of this is inspired and coming from this context of my own personal experience. But I feel like when we're disoriented in a sense and we can't locate ourselves, we can't really attach ourselves to a certain place, there is a freedom and there is like kind of an encouraging way of living where you're with through that you're able to connect to more places and more ideas or ways of living. So you become a more open person in a sense. So like these objects are kind of trying to embody that.
Thank you, Hedia. That was very beautiful.
Thank you.
I love how all three artists, we had some sort of imagery of Iran, displacement, families. That was really beautiful to see. I want to encourage you guys as audience to ask any questions you have for the artists, any questions you had saving up from all these three presentations we had. So feel free to write it in the chat or raise your hand. Layla?